Oh, hello! It's been a couple years since we've done a studio tour video, so I think it's probably time to do an updated one. You might notice that the physical space of where I make my videos hasn't really changed that much, but I hope, if you watch a video from 2 years ago versus a video from recently, you're gonna notice that the newer videos look and sound better. And some of that has to do with me just learning more and improving my own technical skills, while other parts of that have to do with equipment upgrades and new stuff that I'm using. There's actually quite a bit of new stuff in here, so let's talk about it. So overall, I'm pretty proud of the space. It's not really a giant location, but I think I've tried my best to make good use of every square inch. And this is just a spare bedroom in our house. It's like a decently sized bedroom, but it's probably not made for exactly the kind of stuff that I use it for, but it works. It's 12 feet by 12 feet, so that's 144 square feet, because math, 13 to 14 square meters-ish, if you're trying to figure out how much space it is. So it's enough for me to do what I need to do, but a big problem is that half of the space is taken up, or at least like literally a quarter of the space is taken up by a giant drum set. And I play my drums like 4 or 5 days a week, so it's not something that I want to get rid of, but it's a pretty giant drum set. And it's almost in the background of my videos, like become a character now. And I do like the way that the lights reflect off the cymbals and everything. It's symbolic of stuff that looks good. But before focusing too much on that, let's focus on really one of the most important things for like a video production streaming studio. And that's gonna be cameras, because that is something that has really changed over the past 2 years. In May of 2021, I bought this camera right here, which is the Sony A7IV. I think in 2021, it became a law that if you were a YouTube channel, you had to have a Sony A7IV. I might do a stream or a video where I dive into that decision to switch from Canon to Sony a little more in depth. I do have several podcast episodes that I'll put links in the description to if you want to know like the thought process behind it. But it was a long, drawn out, like months long decision before I finally got this camera. And I really, really love this camera. It works great. So much so that I actually ended up getting a second Sony camera recently, which is the FX3. I still have one Canon EOS R. I used to have two, and I sold one to help fund the purchase of the FX3. And it's so neat to have them. I cannot believe how much I like them. It's gonna be hard for me to show you the A7S III since that's what I'm using right now, but I have the Sony 24mm f1.4. This is my main lens on here. I had the Sigma 24, and I still have the Sigma 24mm f1.4 for Canon, and so when I got the Sony camera, I got the Sony equivalent of that lens. And then the FX3 kind of hangs out over here and has kind of become my main A camera. The A7S III and the FX3 have the exact same image quality. They're just in different bodies, but the internals of the cameras are identical, so you can match them up. The image quality is the same. There's no difference there, but there's a few things on the FX3 that make it a little bit better as an A camera. The biggest thing being this audio handle that it comes with that can handle 2 full-size XLR inputs. And of course with full manual control over everything too. That's been great because it's allowed me to start using the Sennheiser MKH50 as my main boom mic, and then that just runs directly in to the FX3 if I can get it to focus over there. And that's really cool because now I have an XLR mic that is automatically synced to my footage from the camera. I don't have to run through the Rodecaster Pro, which is normally what I would do when I used an XLR mic in my videos. And this has been a great setup for all those times that I want to have high quality audio without having a mic in the shot and without using a lavalier mic like I'm using right now, because I don't always 100% love the audio from lavalier mics, but they are super convenient. And I also finally invested in an upgraded tripod, which is this big beefy Manfrotto tripod here that can hold a ton of weight. I've just needed a heavy duty tripod for like 10 years at this point. And one thing I really love about it is it has all these mounting points. So I have this iFootage boom arm just connected with a quick release plate right here. And if I want to take this off, I can just pop this out and then the tripod doesn't have this arm sticking out on it. And I can just snap this back on, and now I have a boom arm. And it's eliminated the need for what I used to do, which was have a second boom arm mounted over here that was running a boom mic over there. So it sort of cleaned up my setup quite a bit. And then normally when I'm filming my videos, I have a second camera over here, which is now typically the A7S Mark III, but for right now I have my EOS R just as a stand-in. And that's on my 10 or 11-year-old Manfrotto tripod, which still works great, but I just needed something a little more heavy duty. And whenever I have a camera here, it has a 50mm lens so that I can get a second shot over there when I'm sitting at the desk, because that's normally the setup for my videos. This is the Hollyland Cosmo, which is running into this monitor here. So that way, when I'm sitting at the table, I can see that everything's in focus. And then the EOS R has kind of become my third camera. So sometimes if I'm doing something on this table here and I need to show close-ups of it, I'll have the EOS R sort of positioned like here, usually with a longer zoom lens. And then I can cut away to close-ups of, you know, whatever I'm trying to show here. The R is also a little more well-suited for still photos because it has a 30-megapixel sensor, so it's not as strong of a video camera as the Sony's, but it is a stronger stills camera, so it's nice to have that for when I need still photos too. As I was editing this video, this kind of showed up, and now I don't know what that means for the EOS R, but this is the Sony A7IV, which is a great video camera, but also an excellent photo camera. Then one thing I use a lot, which I'm actually using a lot today, is this, which is just a cheap microphone stand that I put the ball head from a Joby GorillaPod on, and then I can put a camera on here, and it's sort of not super stable, but it's an easy way to just position cameras all around in different setups and stuff. And of course, my desk is at the heart of this setup. These are just two Home Depot Husky workbenches that I've had for years, just put into kind of an L configuration. This computer setup is still the base model M1 Mac Mini, which I just have mounted underneath the desk along with its hub, so that way I can just plug in peripherals and things right here. And then that goes into my 34-inch LG monitor. Now, as you might know, I did get the 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. It's the 14-inch one with 32 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive, and 24-core GPU, which in my review for this, I mentioned that I accidentally ordered the 24 core. I kind of meant to order the 32 core, but then it turns out on the 14-inch that the 24 is sort of like the most efficient and best performing, so that was a happy accident. This has now become my main computer that I use for like editing and work and stuff, but I love keeping it portable, and so pretty much everything in here, the Rodecaster, the ATEM, all that is still connected to the Mac Mini, which I use for like all my streaming, all my video calls, stuff like that. And then this MacBook is like my portable work computer. But if I want to use it in here, I just have the one Thunderbolt 3 cable that runs into the monitor, and then I plug it in here and it charges the computer and powers the monitor, and that's awesome. And it's just one cable and it's like magic. And probably no surprise here, but the Rodecaster Pro and the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO still live sort of at the heart of my desk's AV setup situation with all the cables running there. The desks aren't in a perfect L shape, so I have this little cart back here that has some other gear on it, and on the top shelf is where I have my UPS, so that way I always have power for all this stuff, even if things sort of go sideways on me. And as much as I've been loving using a boom mic, I still, of course, love all of my other microphones that tend to be positioned more close to me. So I've got my Rode PSA-1 Plus here with mics that I kind of switch out all the time. This is the Earthworks Icon. And if you watch my review of the PSA-1 Plus, I talked a lot about the logos that are on it. After making that review, I went back at it with some chemical solvent to remove vinyl letters, and I was actually able to remove all of the logos entirely. So now it's a really nice, clean, not distracting boom arm. I've also got these little edifier speakers here, one here and one there. I know they're not positioned perfectly, but they sound really good, and they let me do basic edits. And then when I do like the finished versions of my videos, I just wear headphones for those. This desk here is an absolute mess, and I wish it were more organized, but I try to keep stuff that I need that's not really like super pretty on camera down here. And then over here has sort of turned into my like vintage camera collection. I just find these old cameras super interesting, and there's also something about like they were impossible for me to afford as a kid when I wanted them, but now they're really, really, really affordable on eBay. So I have the Canon L1, which I did an entire like 30-minute video about the history of this one. This was the world's first interchangeable lens camcorder. This was not supposed to be a working camcorder. I just bought it off eBay and ended up being able to bring it back to life, and it actually records. I just have to use a different lens on it. I was able to buy one of the original microphones, and I was even able to find a remote for it. So I have like the complete L1 setup here. And then of course I've got the Canon XL1. This was my dream camcorder as a kid. This was like a pro level interchangeable lens thing from the late 90s, early 2000s. This camera is amazing. Of course, it's standard definition. It's not, you know. And then I've got its little brother, which is the Canon GL2. It's also a 3CCD, 3-chip tape camcorder, but it does not have interchangeable lenses. And I bought this camcorder so that I could film this camcorder because I want to make a video about the XL1, but I want it to be filmed with what looks like the XL1. But that all got kind of derailed because I bought the coolest thing ever, which is this camera here. This is a Sony DSR-390. This is a broadcast news ENG electronic news gathering camera from 2003. And it takes these big DV tapes, but it can also take mini DV tapes, which is the same as those other camcorders. But my very first job was interning at a local TV station when I was in high school in like 2001, and we had cameras like this, and I was always so excited when I got to use them, but they were like tens of thousands of dollars. I got this one for $400 on eBay, and it only has like a couple hundred hours on it. It's in like perfect condition. It has this amazing lens. Here, I can film some stuff with this. There we go. So here we go. This is the Sony A7S III that I've been filming everything else with. There's me, hello. And I really love this because this goes wide over here, but then I can zoom in super far. Of course, everything's manual focus. I can show you everything on the wall here. And right now, this standard definition footage is being upscaled to 4K, so it probably doesn't look amazing, but I still think it holds up pretty well. And I absolutely love like the form factor and the build quality of this camera and all the things that the lens can do. It's kind of amazing, and it's like one of my favorite things that I've ever owned. And other little lights that I can use, like this IntelliTech one, this Dracast one if I need when I'm like filming B-roll and stuff and I just need some small lights. I got my SM7B, which I use a lot. And then back here I've got, oh, this is my 2013 MacBook Pro, which I still use for sometimes just doing like email and comments and stuff. It still works. We'll just say that. And back here I've got the Nanlite PavoTube 2, the 30X, the one that can do like the RGB rainbow stuff and pixel effects. And I've been really loving having that back here because it kind of casts this awesome, you know, spectrum of color over there. And I guess we can talk about lights because I've done quite a few upgrades in that area. So my key light has been the Nanlite Forza 200 running through the Aperture Light Dome Mini, and that's just being bounced off a wall and onto me. Thing about that is it's only at 40% brightness and it's making the room super bright. I like really bright high key lighting, and this provides more than enough of that. Of course, the light is on a C-stand, so as you can see, if I want to, I can move it up and have the light become an overhead like top light over here when I'm doing B-roll footage and stuff like that, and then I can move it back over there. So the C-stand is outstanding, see? My fill light is still the first dedicated video light I ever bought, which is this Dracast silk gray light. They don't even make these anymore, I don't think. And it's just bouncing off of this paper here. I do have a Nanlite PavoTube sort of mounted back here, so I can change colors and it lights up these microphones and things. And it kind of looks like, I don't know, it just looks neat over there. I am so excited about this right here because there is a window back here that always just looked really ugly on camera. So I got these little, you know, these impact rollers, these background rollers you see all the time. And then I got some background paper from B&H, a gray one and a blue one, still deciding on what I want for a third color. These are only 4-foot long sections, so they're pretty small, but then they completely cover up the window. They look great on camera. They're great for backdrops. You might have noticed a lot of my B-roll and a lot of my thumbnails have that blue backdrop there, so I just roll that down. Since my monitor is on this boom arm, I can just move it out of the way, and then I can set stuff up in front of the paper rolls over here. I've got another PavoTube in the corner back here to sort of fill in some lights. And then I've got 2 more PavoTubes on the floor down here, and those give light to this corner over here, which I struggled for a long time trying to get that to look delightful. And then I've also got another PavoTube behind my guitars over here. We'll talk about all those in a second. And then I'm fortunate enough to have this little forest of PavoTubes over here, which aren't specifically dedicated to anything. So I'm constantly moving these around and shifting them when I need to. And I've got another PavoTube up over there that I can just, all these are just mounted easily on the wall so I can pull them off and move them around whenever I want. I don't know if these lights have changed, but this light, and this light are all Aperture B7C bulbs. So they're dedicated video lights. There's a little Nanlite Pavo Tube 6C over there. Those are all plugged into a little power strip right there. And then in here, in this cabinet, I have 2 Aperture MCs to light up the cabinet, which is cool because they're charging all the time. And they're just held in here with magnets. So if I need one, I can just unplug it and it's fully charged. I started mounting microphones on the wall. I did a whole video about that. So we have the Shure MV7, the MV7X, the Warm Audio 47 Junior. We've got the Rode NT1, the RE20, the King B2, the Lewitt LCT 240. Then we've got the the 512 Audio Skylight, the Shure Super 55, the Neat Worker Bee, the old one, and then another pod mic. Oh, and here we've got the Shure 55 SH2, and then back in here, there's pod mic, Rode NT USB Mini, Shure SM57, and Samson Q2U and Samson Q9U, and of course the Blue Yeti, the venerable Blue Yeti. By the way, this is the first camcorder I ever used, this old Sony 8mm camcorder here. And this was my first digital camera. It's a Polaroid little digital camera that costs like $100. Got it when I was in high school. You might notice that to put these microphones up, I took down a lot of the foam little egg crate panels that I had. Those didn't really do much of anything, and the microphones look a little better. I do have 2, I'll call them pro level acoustic panels. These are from Acoustamac.com. They're 2 feet by 4 feet. One of them is on this closet door so that when I'm sitting here and talking, my voice bounces off of that. And the other one is on the ceiling right above me. And these 2 together kind of help to get decent sounding audio while recording. And I used to have a C-stand right here while this VariPole was going across the ceiling, but I took the VariPole down and mounted it here, so it actually takes up very little space, but it's incredibly helpful. So I've got a GoPro mounted here that I use for an overhead shot during live streams. This is the Hero 7. I've got another GoPro on the bottom. This is the Hero 3 that I use as a dog camera, because usually when my wife and I do our live stream together, our dogs are under the desk down here, and so this is the dog cam. And this is where I've got my little Elvid LCD monitor to monitor my B camera. This monitor is pretty cheap. It's not super great. Actually, I don't even think they make it anymore, but the reason I have it here is because it has these analog inputs, so I can use it with all of my old camcorders if I need to. And then the closet itself has become my equipment storage. Don't judge me on the messiness. There is a method to this madness. Basically down here is just bags and storage things, and then some other parts for things like GoPros and filters and stuff. Up here I've got microphone windscreens, some audio interfaces, little peripherals for stuff, things that I want to use, like this audio gear here, but I don't have room to keep set up permanently, my A7IV Mini, another GoPro, my Sony RX100. This empty spot's normally where my cameras would go when I'm not using them, so it'd be like FX3, A7S3, EOS R. And then I've got my lenses. Let me show you all about it. So we've got some filters back here. This is the Canon 24-105, the Sigma 24mm f1.4, absolutely great lens, which with this Sigma MC11 adapter will work with full autofocus on Sony cameras. It's very cool. This is normally where the lens that's on this camera over here, the Canon RF 50mm 1.8, that's where that would be. And then I have the Sony version of that lens, the Sony 50mm 1.8. The Canon version is superior to the Sony by far. This is where the lens I'm using right now would be, the Sony 24mm f1.4. This is a new one for me, actually both of these are. The one on the left is the Zeiss Batis 85 1.8. Absolutely amazing lens. I've never had an 85mm before. And this one is the Sirui 50mm anamorphic full frame lens. So I've been playing around with this anamorphic lens and it is unbelievable. This is such a good lens. It's a very specialized lens, so I can't use it for everything, but I absolutely love it. This shelf down here is just a bunch of like camera straps, mounts, tripods, you know, ball heads, things like that. There's a lot of just little bits and pieces that you need, batteries and adapters and hard drives and all that kind of stuff. This box down here are all of my analog cables for all of my old camcorders. And I've got some audio gear. There's the video mics, which are great, some adapters and recorders and things, the Deity Pocket Wireless, which is what I'm using now, my teleprompter and stuff kind of hang out down there. And of course, I've got my YOLO box, which is great for mobile live streams, and it's also a very nice monitor, basically kind of nicer than this one, but this one works good for being right here. Of course, it's hard not to notice that half of the room is filled up with music equipment, so let's talk about that real quick. We've got my guitar amp and my theremin right here. My theremin I got in 2005, and it's awesome, but it stopped working in like 2012, and I just fixed it, so now it works again. Over here, I've got my bass amp, and my bass is this SX bass, which is actually a very cheap like Fender knockoff, but it sounds great. It was like $140, and it's very fun to have a bass to play. This corner, I've got a Fender standard Strat, but it's got a cool cherry burst finish. This was from 2016. This was the first Strat I ever had, and I really, really like it. I started playing guitar in 2001, but I never had a Strat until 2016. And this corner over here, I forgot to mention, it's like this little alcove as you walk in. I tried to make use of it, so there's some whiteboards where I can plan stuff out, store a few things. And then also I've got this guitar, which is another very inexpensive SX guitar, but it's just a really cool looking guitar, and it actually sounds pretty neat, and it's a super long scale. It's almost like a baritone. And then I've got this rack of guitars here, which is very cool because I love all of my guitars, but each of these is very unique and they don't make any of them anymore. This one is an Ibanez Jet King that I got in January of 2005. And it's a really cool guitar. They used to sell for like $300, and then I think they realized $300 was way too good of a deal, so let's stop making these because they were definitely losing money on them. It weighs like 1,000,000 pounds though. This is a guitar that I've had the longest. I bought this with my first paycheck for my first paying job. When I was in high school, I was working at a coffee shop. This is a 2002 Fender Standard Telecaster. It was $350 back then. I got this in August of 2002, so we're coming up on our 20th anniversary together. And they still make standard Telecasters, but they don't make them in this specific agave blue. This was the second Strat I got. I got this in January of 2019, and this is a classic 50s Fender Strat in surf green. So this was like the first legit surf green guitar that I got. It's awesome. They still make vintage like 50s series Strats that are very similar, but it's not the classic series. So this is now a classic. Because 2018 was the very first time my YouTube channel ever made any money. In 2018, I made $600 from affiliate revenue, and I put that money towards this guitar, which had been in my shopping list online since 2007. So that was cool, thank you. And I've got the Seafoam Green Deluxe Telecaster, which has a standard Telecaster head. This is very cool because this was a limited run for Guitar Center. They only made 300 of these total, and they came in 3 colors, and they only did 100 of each color, so there's only 100 of these are out there. This is Seafoam Green, and this is Surf Green. There's actually a difference. And this one's awesome. This is my newest guitar, although it's not that new anymore. I got this in August of 2020. This is the Fender 66. It's sort of, they were doing this weird like alternate reality series where they were sort of mashing up. This is basically like if a jazz bass were a guitar, is kind of what they were going for. And I love this thing. This is such a good guitar. They stopped making them, unfortunately, but this thing's amazing, and it's in Sonic Blue. Finally, we did get a NAS system. So this is a 48 terabyte NAS that has backups of all our footage and stuff for both my wife and I. We just got that at the end of 2021. But this lives out in our living room in the main part of our house where our main internet connection is. And this is Ben, our dog. It's always important to back up your stuff, and the NAS was just better than a stack of hard drives that could potentially fail with no redundancy. Here's a photo of what this room looked like when it was being built, and then originally it was just sort of a guest room. And then when I got my drums, I needed more space, so that's why I took over this room, and I wanted to paint this wall blue. Surprising, I know. And I've been adding to this gallery of photos for years, but what I'm really proud about is that I try to make sure none of these are just random mass-produced art that doesn't mean anything. Everything on here has some sort of specific meaning. Actually, everything on all of the walls in here has some specific meaning to me, or was created by someone that means something to me, or it's all very personal. I think that pretty much covers the whole setup. It's been really fun to evolve this over time. One thing that I did do, since this was a room that I used before having a YouTube channel, it wasn't really set up in a way that was ideal for being used on camera. So about a year after I started my channel, one day I came in here with the camera and I just sort of went around and tried to ignore all the furniture and stuff and just figure out what looked best on camera. And I found that this corner over here where I typically have my main camera, that was the perspective from which everything looked the most interesting. And so I sort of like planted the camera there and then rearranged the room around that. So the room itself doesn't make a lot of sense as you would normally see a room set up, like an office or something, but it makes a lot of sense when you're dealing with stuff that's on camera and, you know, that kind of thing. So whatever your space is, if you're setting up a studio, I kind of think that's a great idea, is to take your camera, see what looks best through your camera's lens, and then try to adapt everything else to that, instead of just going to your existing like office setup and trying to find an ideal camera angle, which just like might not exist. The never-ending process of, you know, building and refining and adjusting and changing a video production, audio production studio is really, really fun to me, and I love it. Speaking of things that are fun that I love, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel on Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to know more about my specific setup, I do have a lighting tour video and a desk setup video where I dive into both of those things in a lot more detail.